talk through the first data question in the Year 13 booklet. The topic surrounding this is succession. We've got three different lines on the graph. We've got colonisers, which you can see here. We've got other non-woody plants here. And we've got trees which start to appear here. When looking at a graph, the first thing to do is before you start a question is to try and work out what can this graph tell you. So this is what I took from the graph. There might be more things you could conclude, but this should help you. If you can do this kind of thing before you start the questions, it will really help. So what we've got with the colonisers, if you're going to describe the graph, you can see you've got a sharp rise up until 1 year, then you've got a sharp decrease to 2 years, a gradual decrease, and then they become extinct. There's no more of them left after 5 years, so no more colonisers after 5 years. If you're going to describe the other non-woody plants, you can't just say they rise or they increase, because that would imply you've got a linear increase, or you've got proportional increase. You can clearly see there's two different parts to this. It goes up steeply from 1 year, and it goes up gradually. So that would be the describe part of this. So they appear at 1 year, because there's none of them there. They appear at 1 year, they rise to 2 years, and then sharply, and then you've got a gradual increase from 2 to 10 years. You can also see, if you've got standard deviation bars, you can see here we've got standard deviation bars, and here we have as well. You have to use them in an answer. So analyse it before you start any of the questions. So you can see that the increase here is actually significant, because the top of that bar there and the bottom of that bar there do not overlap. So there's no overlap between that data point and that data point there. So you have a significant increase. The number of non-woody plants have increased significantly. Between 2 and 10 years, we do not have a significant increase at all, because the top of that bar and the bottom of that bar there overlap. So that bar is higher than that bar there. So you have an overlap all along this point here. The standard deviation bars overlap. So there's not a significant increase. You can also look at this graph in terms of succession, and we can see we've got colonisers at the beginning, so they are the first to create a colony. So we know that colonisers, pioneers, can survive in really hostile environments. So they rise when the environment's hostile. They modify the habitat, so they could die and add humus to the soil. They could add mineral ions, they could add nitrates to the soil, they could be nitrogen fixers, or some other things that they could do as well. So they modify the habitat, make it less hostile. And we can see at their peak, we've also started to get the other non-woody plants colonising. So these can now colonise because the pioneers have changed the environment. So these colonise and they sharply increase. As these increase, the colonisers decrease, suggesting that because as they increase, they decrease. These are outcompeting those for could be food, could be not food, it's the plants. For light, could be space, could be for nutrients. And then over time, as these continue to increase, actually results in the extinction of the colonising plants. So in this next graph, we've got two species of willow that were planted to try and remove cadmium from the soil. So we know that the willow is going to be successful if it's got more cadmium in its tree trunk than it has in the soil. So again, it's useful to highlight and annotate anything you see on the graph before you start questions. If you're going to say which is more successful, if you're going to evaluate this, you can see that there's actually arguments for both sides, and that's what you want to do with an evaluate. So which is better, species A, which are the dots, or species B, at removing cadmium from the soil? So first of all, let's have a look here. We can see that B is highly effective here. At 4 milligrams per kilogram of cadmium in the soil, species B actually removes a lot more cadmium from the soil because it's found in the tree trunks. So it's taking it out of the soil and it's becoming part of the mass of the tree. So there's much more cadmium taken out of the soil by species B at 4 milligrams per kilogram than species A. Remember to use comparative language. You make encompass some more than that. Other things we know, so that's species B, that's a point that makes that more effective. However, on the whole, species A is better. So first of all, species A, we can see, can survive in higher concentrations of cadmium in the soil. This is suggesting that species B cannot survive at the higher concentrations of cadmium in the soil because there's no crosses anywhere for 6 or 8. So 8, so that's a plus point for species A. Another plus point for species A is at nearly every other point, every other concentration apart from 4, so at 0, at 2, at 3, and at 6 and 8, species A has more cadmium in the tree trunks than species B does. Another point, which is quite difficult to see, but it's not an obvious point, is that every single concentration of cadmium in the soil, the concentration of cadmium in the tree trunks is higher in species A than it is in the soil. So for example here, we've got 7 milligrams per kilogram in the tree trunk, but we've got 4 in the soil. Here we've got 4 milligrams per kilogram in the tree trunk, we've got 3 in the soil. So that's indicating that it's taking more out of the soil than is in the soil. Another thing to pick up on, it's a common question, it's one of the AO3 questions, it's in the front of your data booklet, is you could be asked why were these units used, so milligrams per kilogram. So this is the idea that it allows comparison. So different trees have got different masses, so look at what unit is, so it's per kilogram, so that's a unit of mass. So different trees have got different masses, so it allows comparison. So it wouldn't be fair to compare a huge tree with a small tree, because the fact that a tree is much bigger would mean it probably has more cadmium in it. So you have to make it comparable, so per kilogram, and makes it comparable.